Good morning, guys. Let's see. The first code word for today is umbrella. Today we're going to be talking about, that's weird. We're going to be talking about the last project module, module 6, where we're talking about colorful cocoons and wrapped objects. And I wanted to talk about two people that are really excellent at this, which is Jeanne-Claude and Christo. And so we'll be going through portions of their website and just looking at and talking about some of the work that they've done in the past. It looks like, regarding the final, what I may be doing is two sections of it, because it looks like most everybody can do the morning one, but then I'll also do the evening one. I think what we'll do, though, is I'll have you sign up, and that'll be the section that you're responsible for coming to. I'm still kind of trying to figure that out, but I should have it figured out by the end of this weekend. I'm sorry, I've been working on grading and stuff. I'm not caught up right now. I've been sick the last couple nights, last couple days, so I haven't been able to do that. But I will get it taken care of right away soon here. How did everybody do on the color tile / texture tile project? Do you guys feel that was successful?
Yeah, I
I
especially
had a lot
enjoyed
of fun with. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think I was gonna say the exact same thing, McKenna. I was just gonna say I really enjoyed the texture tile, especially.
Well, that's excellent. What kind of weird texture? What was the weirdest thing that you used that you'd never thought of before on the texture one?
I used an old egg carton, and it was one of the ones that's like not the styrofoam, but kind of like paper, like I don't know how to describe it, but
Yeah, I know it's like the paste paper kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. And anyway, it just kind of I just ripped it up in the way that yeah, it just created a unique texture.
All right, very good. Anybody else have some fun stuff to relate on their texture tiles / color tiles? Anybody get thrown out of a paint store? That's what I'd like to know. As you were collecting your free samples? The way I found out that some of those little hanging magazines in Hobby Lobby are free and some aren't is that one of the students got in trouble at the store because they were taking all the magazines they could find, and they're not really magazines. They're like half sheet color flyers. They were taking several of them and were stopped for shoplifting because some of the ones they took were ones that Hobby Lobby actually sold. So you do have to be a little bit careful. Nobody ended up getting in trouble or anything like that. They were fine. I just thought that was, looking at it, it can be kind of confusing because there are ones that you have to buy that are right next to ones that are completely free. Did anybody, you in your design experience, you probably use more than, or you probably use several websites for colors? Did you guys appreciate the website that we used for that, or do you have suggestions on a better one?
I thought it was useful, the one we used.
Good. Do you know if there's a better one that we could use, or was that one pretty good? Oh, you said that that one was pretty good. So is there a better one that you know about?
I don't know of one.
Okay. Well, if anybody does come up with a better one, please let me know because I thought I like that because the different kinds of color relationships are right there underneath the color wheel and you can see exactly what's going on. So I'm glad you guys had a positive experience. Okay, I'm going to do a screen share as soon as I get things set up here. All right, can everybody see this?
Yep.
All right, excellent. This is Christo, and you guys probably know who he is. He's the guy that he and his longtime partner, Jeanne-Claude, they wrap everything they can find in plastic. That's what they're known for. But they do a lot of other things too, like Gates in New York. They set up these basically little stands to hold fabric that drop down just at about most people's forehead level, so they had to kind of interact with the fabric in some way. And it was they set them up on several pathways in Central Park in New York, and they've done other things too, like along those lines. Essentially, what they'll do is um, go into a landscape, apply material that doesn't necessarily belong there, like plastic or fabric, and they do it for a number of reasons. But one reason is to call attention to the landscape that they're interacting with. And I really like these guys as a great example for this cocooning project because of how they do it and the rationale why they do it. So these are a series of works where they're wrapped cans and wrapped bottles that he set up. And I want you to pay attention to how they use color as well. Now here's one with just two wrapped cans. These are not very big. Not very big at all. But I want you to look at these. What are some of the things that you notice just from this image with these two cans?
I think the first thing I notice is just the contrast between the two, how one is very colorful and one doesn't have any color.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important contrast. If we look at it a little bit closer, even though this top can reads as grays, we can see that there's little splashes of color on the string. Can you guys see that? A little bit of red in the string, kind of helping to tie it in with this guy. Any other first impressions? One thing I'd like you to look at is pay attention to how this string and the fabric interact with this top can. And pay attention to that part of it as we go on and look at other um, images. Oh, that's weird. Here we go. I am going to turn off screen share a little bit, see if I can get this image so that's I can fill the screen so that it's a little bit easier to see. I'm sorry, it doesn't look right because I want you to be able to see the entire image and not just cut it off. Let's see if that will do it. Okay, I think that'll be about as close as I can get. Okay, I'm gonna go back in the screen share now. Okay, can you guys see this guy right here?
Yep.
Okay. First impressions as we look at this. Where do you think you'd find? I mean, if you found these somewhere, where do you think you'd find them?
Like an alley or an abandoned house or something.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like it's something that, I mean, it's a place that you probably would never want to go willingly in a million years. But yes, definitely someplace abandoned. What's one of the things you notice about the use of color in this?
Well, the color that is used is warm, and it's all on one side.
Yeah, I think that there's really bright colors right here. And I think it's fascinating that you see some of these, like here's a rust spot. Here's a little bit of paint poking through. It looks to me like it's a very deliberate use of colors to echo this, but that are really, really subtle. Can you guys see that with the warmth of these two wrapped cans? Just like what I think was it McKenna just saying? And then look at there's little spots of color right here on this dark can. It kind of ties in this little bit of rust. Can everybody see that? Can you guys see the points of color that the mouse went over?
Yeah.
Okay, so on first glance, we look at this and think, oh, all the colors over there, but it's subtle, isn't it? I mean, because unless a lot of the times, unless you're looking at it for a long time, you probably wouldn't even notice like the rust spot in this silver can, would you?
Yeah, it's interesting because even my comment, I was like, all the colors on one side, when obviously when you look closer, it is scattered throughout. So it's interesting, like the longer you look at a piece, all of the details you can pick up.
Yeah, and I really like that observation from you because that comes back to the tools of artistic critique exercise that people are working on as well. Yeah, it's the longer you look at it, the more you're kind of rewarded for taking that attention. Now, if that bottle just on the left with the sediment at the bottom and the texture inside, that just grosses me out. By the way, I'll just say that right now. It's disgusting. But I do like this as a composition piece. What's one of the things that you notice about the strings and the fabric wrapping the cans? Are they all the same?
they're all at different levels and different angles, and some of the strings look like they're different colors. So it makes it look really random and realistic.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because, yeah, these three right here just across the top, it looks like they've been wrapped the same way, but exactly like what you say, the strings on this are more of a tan. This is more of a white string, perhaps. And here, the vertical line on the far left can is almost hidden. And then these two, they're all at different, all three of them are at different heights. And we go down, and it's the same thing. It's almost appears to be randomized. And we look at how the fabric is done. On this can right here, the fabric is very smooth where it faces us. This can right here, there's a lot of wrinkles to it. So I think that's absolutely fascinating. Now, I go on like this. Somebody like my grandpa will say, well, it's just a bunch of junk. On one hand, yes, it is just a bunch of junk. But on the other hand, none of this stuff looked like this when Christo got a hold of it. He manipulated everything. He even talks about the material he used to give this fabric that particular texture with the dirt and grimy junk in it, and making it look like there's years and years worth of old motor oil on it. So we're just going to go through a couple more of these images. Now this, what I want you to look at is pay attention to the folds of fabric. And think about what the artist actually had to do to get this to look so random. So look at this one here. So we've got these cans where we have two horizontal strings wrapping around and several verticals. This one, it looks like almost a checkerboard, the way that the fabric is folded. Here, it's a much simpler string tying. It looks like the string was mostly wrapped just around the center, and you can tell because of the folds of the fabric right here that there was a lot of effort put into tightening the strings. Can anybody see this, what I'm pointing out?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And just right here, see the difference between this with the very simple wrapping like those first ones we looked at, and here you get all the folds and creases and everything in it. Isn't that interesting? And this is the scale that we're looking at. See how tiny those are? This bottle on the left, what are your first impressions on that?
It looks like it's been like caked with dirt or plaster or something, like it's been buried or something.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He puts paint on this fabric, he wraps it up while it's still wet. He smushes dirt and stuff in, but it looks caked, it looks old. It looks like it's been buried for a long time. I think these are fascinating. One of the aspects I think about this is these things they appear to be outside of the normal flow of time. I think part of that is, even though we can recognize them as relatively contemporary objects, they look like they've been around for an awful long time. And I like that kind of anachronism, an invitation to an audience to explore. These things almost look like archaeological artifacts as opposed to stuff you'd find just hanging out in the garage, which is what they are. And I think that aspect is really interesting. And there's a couple reasons for that, I think, and we'll talk about them in just a minute. Now here's some stuff that involves wrapping objects with plastic. So on this section of the website, we look at how he's kind of manipulated paint and color and texture, but also how he's wrapped these things with fabric, essentially, and string is what he's doing. But it's obvious that he's used like enamel and paint and other things on that fabric to give it the texture it has, and also cake it with that, like what Amelia was saying, cake it with dirt and grime and stuff like that, and make it look like it was buried. Now we're looking at plastic wrap things. This one looks pretty disgusting. I'll just say that. Anybody want to argue with me, or does everybody think that that looks kind of disgusting?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Now, Sam, what do you notice about the strings on this, or the twine?
Well, my first thought was that it looks like a chain link, excuse me, a chain link fence. Um, the way that it's been done, and it like the texture of it contrasts more with the material that's inside for me.
Yeah, I think so. What about the string reminds you of a chain link fence?
The way that it's kind of twisted, and it's very there's a lot of tension, which makes it look more like metal.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I also noticed that it's very grid like, it's very structured compared to the inside where it looks like it's just a mass of really nasty shirts and socks that were just not good enough to donate to DI. But yeah, I think it's interesting how the twine looks so formal, essentially, and the material that it's wrapping looks so chaotic. Scroll down a little bit. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. He's wrapped things with fabric. There's some tassels on this thing right here, and as well as with plastic. Here's some more things. Sometimes you can tell what the objects are, sometimes you can't. How many different kinds of twine were used just on this object on the right? Can anybody tell? It looks to me like there are specific, at least 3 different kinds of twine. Looks to me like there's a rather relatively thin twine. Looks to me like this vertical and horizontal are from a thicker twine, and then a lot of this is kind of like right in between, which I think is interesting. One of the things that is fascinating about Jeanne-Claude is that it looks like this is random. But what is really interesting, and we'll see one of the pictures later, he would sketch this out. He would work all this out. Where are the folds of the fabric going to be, or the plastic? How am I going to tie this? Where do I want the tension? Where are the knots going to be? Like right here, you see several different knots. These are specifically placed by the artist. Knowing that, does that change your thoughts about what we're seeing at all?
Well, it makes me want to look at it longer and look at the specific details because I know that they weren't put there by accident and that they were placed for a reason.
Yeah, it's gives you a completely different perspective, doesn't it? What I like about this too, like this looks almost like the cord you'd use to hang up laundry. This right here has a very definite, significantly different texture. Then we also have this red cord that kind of reminds me almost of those bungee cords, where it's cord that's wrapped with fabric on the outside. But yeah, it's knowing that the artist took that kind of care with the wrapping and stuff gives it a totally different flavor or a different perspective. Here we've got, looks like 2 different kinds of fabric wrapping this. Does anybody want to comment on the fabric? How old does that fabric feel or look like it could be? And I also want you to look at this a little bit. Notice the wrinkles and how the two different fabrics are treated. What is different about this section than this section? Does somebody want to comment about the difference in the use of twine on either side, or the how the fabric folds differently on either side?
Well, he uses more twine or more intersections of twine on the right side, um, as well as having more folds and things on that side as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. On the left-hand side, it feels a lot more open. And again, keeping in mind that he plans all this stuff out, it gives you a little bit different feeling about it, doesn't it? Than if this was completely random. Would anybody want to be willing to sit in that chair?
No, that looks
Yeah,
like there's blood stains on it.
it looks pretty disgusting, doesn't it? Here's a package on a table. That is not something I want to see delivered from Amazon. That is so disgusting. Well, what are some of the things you're thinking about as you look at this? Oh, here is his partner, Jeanne-Claude, I believe. And this is wrapped in plastic. And then here's a portrait where the portrait itself is wrapped in material so you can't see it. Here's some more interesting things. Another portrait of Jeanne-Claude. This is actually an exhibit, but it looks like something like on cleanup days that the county sponsors, doesn't it? That is just a little disturbing. Now, what are some of the things that we can, knowing that he's doing this on purpose, that it's not random, what are some of the things that we can, I think, logically talk about regarding what he does uh, on these objects? I would like, there's 5 people on this call. I'd like everybody to say something. One thing that I'm looking at is this is a hobby horse. It's wrapped up so only the tail is sticking out, which if you're wrapping it for storage, you're not going to do that. You're going to wrap the whole thing. What is interesting to me is the hobby horse is kind of a symbol of happy moments in childhood. And I think that by doing this, by wrapping it in this way, yeah, it's disturbing. It's a little bit dark feeling, but he's also saying something about the desire to preserve memories of childhood, preserve innocence somehow. And perhaps he's even talking about our desires to preserve those happy memories sometimes may prevent us from preserving them properly. Because we look at this and look at how the hobby horse is wrapped, it does become kind of disturbing. Maybe we blow childhood memories out of proportion. Maybe we uh, do things that are not very innocent in order to preserve the innocence of childhood. Maybe we explore that kind of dark irony as we're trying to preserve something worthwhile. Maybe we're pushing a little bit too hard to preserve it. And I think that these are valid ideas that we can come up with as we interpret this and look at it. Anybody else want to chime? Well, everybody needs to chime in and say something. But what else can you say about this? Like this pram. What are some of the? What's an interpretation that you can give to this? Let's. Jacob, would you like to talk about one of these things? What do you think this is saying?
This is like a this is like a baby carriage, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I feel like it's kind of similar to the hobby horse with like trying to preserve like childhood things, but like going a little too far with it.
Yeah, I think so. It kind of reminds me of was that Bates Motel show or whatever, where the guy's mom died and he kept her mummified body in the room and wouldn't let anybody near it, going just a little too far to preserve a memory. But yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely does not appear to be super healthy. Thank you, Jacob. How about this one, Abby? Could you talk a little bit about this one? What do you think that this one is? And again, we're not looking for a right or wrong answer. I'm just looking to see what your interpretation is, knowing that he's doing all this on purpose.
Um, I mean, maybe it's just because you were talking about mummies and stuff, but that was kind of what I got. But it's kind of weird on the left one that it's like sticking out, so that's a little disturbing if you think of it in like a mummy way. But that's what I got out of it.
Which part is sticking out?
On the left one,
Oh, yeah, right here, this bump.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that if you're thinking about it like mummies, that's really kind of gross because what if the mummy's trying to escape? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's again, he's dealing with all these kinds of issues. Now, what is fascinating to me is what is going on when you're wrapping this. What is the first thing you want to do? When you look at something like this with the wrapping, do you accept this just as an object, or what is the first thing your mind is doing?
You're kind of trying to make up for what you can't see. And so with all of these, like I've kind of just it feels like something's being hidden because I can see that this is a car and I can picture what is underneath the wrapping, but I really don't know for sure. And so it's like kind of an element of mystery and feeling like something is being hidden from view.
Yeah, excellent. That is exactly what I'm hoping for. Uh, what we're dealing with is the human monkey mind, our curiosity. When you wrap something like this is what I was talking about. See that? How he sketches it? Where he sketches where the ropes are going to intersect? Isn't that interesting? But I think what you just said is one of the most important points of this whole cocooning thing. If this was so occluded that you could not tell what it was at the beginning, would you be as curious about it as you are when there's part of it you that knows it's a car? Now, you don't have to answer that question out loud, but I want you to think about this. He's really involved you by wrapping a car because you know it's a car and you immediately want in your mind to start unwrapping it and seeing what's under there. Isn't that fascinating how directly and immediately he's involved you as a viewer? Now, would somebody make a comment about what they think about the sketch? Is that surprising to you that he would sketch it to the point of even drawing in where he wants the ropes to intersect?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so interesting about these is how random they do seem. Like they don't seem like they were thought out or planned. So it is really interesting to see that that he could plan something that does seem so random and so thrown together.
Yeah, it's wild to me. The first time I saw these sketches, I thought, no, he can't. That was after the fact. But yeah, he even goes down to where, like on this side of the car, where the drapery folds are. You know, and it doesn't always match up, but it is really, really close. So I think it's fascinating. And then here's some process shots. Isn't that interesting, though? We look from there to how he's draping the car. And then some of them are different, but a lot of these lines are just where he drew them out. Like this area right here with the triangles. We go down here. You see that triangle right there. Isn't that fascinating? And he'll do variations of these as well that I think are really interesting. Now this one gets into some really strong political commentary. And I want you to think about that, especially in today's world. He takes models and he's wrapping human beings in plastic. There's a video on here as well. And he's wrapping particularly women human beings in plastic. Now, here is her chin. Here's her left arm coming up over her head. Here's her hand. Now, this can be a sensitive subject, but I want you to think about this for a little bit. We just talked about how he plans these things out, how he wraps them. What are some of the things that you can interpret from this? Using his wrapping to wrap women in this way. What are some of the things that you think he might be talking about?
Well, I immediately think of two things, and one is the idea of preservation of beauty and how women aren't like supposed to age. Like as soon as you age, your beauty is just like automatically diminishes. So that's one thing that I think of, and then of course also just the commodification and objectification of women, and especially models who are literally used to sell objects and things. Yeah, those are the two things that come to mind for me.
I think you hit the nails right on the head, and this is exactly what he's talking about. One of the hugest industries on the planet is, selling sheep fat and inorganic compounds to women, trying to convince them that without it they will look ugly. And it is, even though it is a legitimate job for models to be models, they are participating on some level of that commodification process. I think you're absolutely right. And do these ropes look comfortable? First, she's wrapped in plastic. Do you think that's going to be comfortable?
No, and she's also in a pose that looks uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think those ropes look comfortable?
I would also add, I agree with everything Samantha said, and along with the ropes, like those ropes are bonding her there. Like she's in this uncomfortable position and she's tied up and she can't move, and that's like she's being confined to those beauty standards, like Samantha was saying, and she is forced to conform to like this image, and yeah, so.
Yes, I think you guys are all exactly right. So we've gone from just simple haphazard wrapping with plastic to something that has become a really powerful critique on society, isn't it? We're talking about half of society's population being bound in incredible restriction and commodified and treated like essentially either collectibles or refuse, not like human beings. But isn't that interesting how powerful a statement he can make? Jeanne-Claude, well, they made, Christo and Jeanne-Claude just by the process of cocooning something. Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing to me how quickly that message comes through as well, and how timeless it is, apparently.
Well, and it's something that we talked about it because that's my job. But if you saw something like this and you use the tools of artistic critique, you would get to that same interpretation incredibly quickly, wouldn't you? And he doesn't need to put a placard up and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, does he? Now, this, I just wanted to share that with you, just the power of hiding and occluding. We talked about how powerful an incentive it becomes for the viewer to be becoming actively engaged with the work. It's just by cocooning it, just by hiding it. Now here's another little interesting thing. We look at, this is one of the storefronts he did. The actual one is right here behind the painting, and the painting was done specifically to kind of show what he wanted to do. And it's fascinating to me how close the painting is to this, what looks like just a random storefront covering. So he really did. So here is the actual thing right here. And there's the painting. That's really interesting, isn't it? But I want you, as you guys go through everything, I want you to, when you get to this portion of the art research of Module 6, really go through the Jeanne-Claude and Christo website and look at that. And I think it's absolutely fascinating what kind of stuff he did. Just, okay, I'm turning screen share off. Am I off screen share now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, all this computery stuff is still kind of baffling to me. But think about all this kind of stuff. I just think it's really fascinating how by hiding something, we can engage people so directly, so viscerally, and so immediately. It kind of baffles me to one extent. Now, when you do this module, we're going to talk about it again on Monday, as well as the other videos and stuff like that that people are doing. But really be paying attention to how much something can change, how much the context will change. Look through, before Monday, go through that module and look at all those different things. And we're going to talk also again about how much we can change the meaning of something just by hiding it. As you go through the project on Module 6, instead of just wrapping something with a couple strands of twine, really think it through. Do sketches of what it's going to look like, just like Jeanne-Claude and Christo do on their projects. Think about how are you going to fold the material. Now, it's not going to look exactly like your sketch, I guarantee that. But what I want you to do is consider what you're doing, what the process is going, what the materials are going to do, and how your process is going to affect the materials. If you're going to say, for example, take an action figure and wrap it with yarn, wrap it with so much yarn that only a hand sticks out, so that it looks like a ball that a cat might play with. Or wrap it with so much plastic and tie it with string so it looks like some of these, how they used to wrap meat, for example, or how some of these models were wrapped by Christo and Jeanne-Claude. So really think about that and think through the process. Do you have any questions before we separate? let's go around really fast. Just one final thing from each person, and then we'll be done. What I'd like to do is hear from each person just one thing that surprised you about cocooning. And I'm just going to start on my screen. McKenna will be the first one, and then we'll do Samantha, Amelia, Jacob, and Abby. So McKenna, what is one thing that really startled you?
Well, I think it surprised me how, like, if you can see the form of something that is familiar to you, you are much more interested to see what's underneath. Like with the car, I was like, okay, I want to know what color that car is. I want to know everything about it, what's underneath. Whereas something that may be like a little more abstract, I'm like, okay, that's cool. But if something is familiar to me and it's hidden, I want to know what's underneath.
That's an excellent observation. And sometimes we've got to really consider how much information are we going to give to our audience, because how much is too much? How much makes it so that they no longer are engaged? But then also, what is the bare minimum we can do? So yeah, I think that's an excellent observation. How about you, Sam?
I think the range of what can be communicated with the same kind of with the same idea. So like starting out just with the cans, and how different that is from like the women being wrapped. Just I would think with such a specific idea, it would be hard to get a lot of different messages across, but that's clearly not the case.
Excellent. So it's basically it's surprising how one application of a very specific application of medium uh, can communicate a whole broad range of things. Yeah, very good observation. Excellent. How about you, Amelia?
Um, I I feel like when I was looking at those wrapped objects that were obviously familiar objects, I could identify what they were, but I still couldn't see what was underneath them. It created a super disturbing feeling and almost like a dissonance of like it's bizarre. Like I know what's under there, but it's wrapped for a reason, and it creates this almost dark feeling. So that was interesting to see. Yeah, like Samantha said, like the range from the cans all the way to the human bodies.
Excellent. I think that's a really good observation. Yeah, if these were like presents for somebody, they would feel completely different. Yes, absolutely. How about you, Jacob? What was one thing that really startled you?
I was surprised at how I think low cost a lot of these can be done, but at the same time, the I see that Christo and Jeanne-Claude put a lot of effort into wrapping these, and it's like very meticulous also, and also like just how they're able to create messages just by the act of wrapping it is something I've never really thought of.
No, I think that's an excellent observation. Very good. I it is fascinating to me how inexpensive the material is and how much time was invested into the use of applying the material. So yeah, and it's amazing that the range of vocabulary of expression from such a simple, apparently simple thing. Very good. How about you, Abby?
I was just gonna say how deliberate they were in their wrapping. Like it wasn't very random how they wrapped the string, and how much thought and effort they put in to make sure that like where they placed um like the rope or the string or whatever was deliberately placed.
Abby, when you first saw those cans, did you believe me when I said that they actually planned everything?
Um, I mean, not real. Like I did, because I feel like as artists you do plan, but um, no.
It's surprising how intently they did plan, isn't it? And it's weird to me how such intense planning can make it look like when you're done, everything was so completely random, isn't it? That just was that is pretty surprising, isn't it? As we so as you guys are working on this last module, I'm really think about these things that we just talked about, and I have seen some really fascinating projects. I'll tell you about a couple of them. One person really got excited about Christo and Jeanne-Claude, and what they did is they would take different parts of their body, wrap them in saran wrap, and then put clear masking tape around them. And then once that was wrapped, they would either pull it off like a sock if they were able to, or they would trim it down cut it off with a pair of scissors, and then retape it. And when they were all done, they had this life-size wrapping of themselves that had all been taped together. It was kind of floppy, but it looked like a mummy without the mummy, and it was all in plastic. It was really fascinating. So instead of seeing the object and the cocoon, you just saw the floppy cocoon. Another person took some objects and started wrapping them just with different things. They wrapped them with plastic strips from a garbage bag. Then they wrapped that with, I believe it was tape. Then they painted it. Then they wrapped that with string. And it was fascinating because they had these 4 layers of material. You had no idea what the original thing was, but just the object with the string wrapped over the painted tape and plastic, the object itself became really, really interesting. And so you stopped caring what was being wrapped, and you just saw this really fascinating textural object. So there's a couple different things, several different directions that you can go. But I want you to, like I said, go through the research module and really pay attention to the kind of questions that these artists may be asking themselves as they do their stuff. And ask yourself questions like that as well. Are there any final questions for me before we end? All right, well, if not, that's the end of today's little get-together. And I will finalize what we're going to be doing for the meet times for our final and send that to everybody over the weekend. Now, if you guys do have the SRIs, I thought for sure that I'm going to double check, but the SRI thing, everybody who does that, you will get extra credit in the class, and the extra credit amounts to a 1% boost in your grade. So if you get those SRIs turned in, email me an image of the receipt for the SRI, and then you will get 1%, a 1% boost in your grade. Alrighty? So until we meet on Monday, I hope everybody has an absolutely amazing weekend and have a lot of fun. I'm going to try and finish grading everything tonight, but at the very least, by tomorrow night, everything should be graded and up to date. So I will look forward to seeing you guys on Monday, and have a good weekend. So we'll see you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.